Hello again, welcome to the Richard and Judy Book Club in conjunction with WHSmith, and here's this week's book. It's called The Good Father by Noah Hawley. This is quite some piece of work. J. Seagram is going to be the next president of the United States. He's the president in waiting. He's a sort of a deft blend of Bill Clinton and President Kennedy, JFK. All the good bits. And he's going to save the world. The world's in a terrible state, and this man, Seagram, is going to put things right. And the whole world has invested its faith in him. And he's shot dead. He's assassinated. And the man who does the killing, very young guy, is caught on camera to a global audience holding the weapon that delivers the fatal shots. So there's the witness evidence, there's forensic evidence. It's an open and shut case. Everybody thinks he did it, except the boy's father, who's a doctor, and he sets out on a quest to prove his son Daniel's innocence. Now this makes him the most hated man in the United States, which is thirsting for revenge. But it's not just a story about justice. It's a story about American gun laws. It's fascinating about that. It's a story about conspiracy theories. It's fascinating about that. Sadly, Noah Hawley himself couldn't be here to talk about it, so we went to him.
Well, I knew that that I wanted the father in the book to be a professional at a point in his career where he had achieved a certain level of contentment, and he was an accomplished man. He garnered a lot of respect in his field. He was well paid, and he basically felt like he'd gotten through the toughest part of his life. And then when his son is accused of the crime, it's a real comeuppance moment for him. And then so Doctor came to me pretty quickly, but immediately with it came this sort of cascade of ideas about this being in some ways a detective story, by making him a doctor and specifically a rheumatologist, you know, who are really medical detectives. It would give him the hubris to think that he could solve this mystery of what had happened to his son, had his son been responsible for this crime, and he would have the hubris as a medical detective to think that he could figure this out. Well, I think there's two possible answers. One is yes, they're all true, and the other is they're not true, but why is the belief in them so prevalent in American culture? And I think there's something really interesting about the idea that the belief in conspiracies is a kind of religion. If you believe that there are no such things as coincidences or random acts, that everything happens because, you know, some man in a dark, smoky room are making plots, then at least somebody is making these decisions. You know, it's not, the world is not a random place. It becomes scarier. And I pitched this to a friend of mine who's a big conspiracy believer, and I think he felt insulted by the idea that, you know, that I was basically turning his political beliefs into a mental illness, which is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it's interesting to think that the JFK assassination happened on camera, and yet we still don't know what happened, or at least there are people who believe we don't know what happened, and this idea that that there's no such thing as a conclusive fact makes these conspiracies really rife to examine in a fictional context. You know, living in America and living as I do now in Texas, you know, you have a lot of conversations about guns, but you know, I don't think America is the crazy gun culture that everyone thinks it is around the world. I think what's interesting about guns for Americans, and it plays into this conspiracy mindset for me, is that there is this age-old belief, and part of it I think is because we started as you know, a colony of people who were coming from other countries, a lot of whom were escaping a certain religious or political persecution. And it's written into our Constitution that there's a real fear of power, and there's the sort of the individual versus the state. And I think that even to this day that there's a large contingency of people who believe that we're one step away from a martial law scenario where all that's going to stand between us and the sort of tyranny of men in smoky rooms is the gun that we own. And so for Americans, it's not so much this gun ownership as a sort of macho identity. It feels to me it's much more about individualism and a kind of fear of this collective, you know, that the first thing they'll do is take our guns. Well, I have a 2-week-old son, and after 2 weeks I already feel like he has a real personality, even though all he really does is sleep. And you know, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and she has a very definitive personality that I really believe defines how she interacts with the world. You know, she's very stubborn. I try to work with her. I think a lot of 5-year-olds are stubborn, but you know, you try to help your kids understand that if you take the world head on every time, you know, it's not always going to work out well for you. But you know, both of my kids are raised in what I hope is an environment of love and trust, where their parents are there for them every day and teaching them the right lessons. And you hope that that's enough, and you hope that when they grow up and they leave school and they go out on their own, that they're going to be happy, healthy citizens. But I do think that, you know, events happen in our lives that are traumatic or impactful in a way that can change our course, and you know, I definitely think that nurture has a lot to do with it as well, and you know, I get a lot of emails and letters from readers, a lot of whom are parents of adults, children, who are writing really to sort of say, your book impacted me greatly because I'm struggling with the same question. You know, I have an adult child that I don't recognize. I don't know who this person is who I raised, who ate every meal in my house and grew up, you know, with the boundaries that I'd set and became who they are. The idea that after spending 24 hours a day for 25 years raising our children, that, you know, that they can still go off course. That even as we're watching them, they can make the wrong choice, and I think that's what keeps parents up at night. And certainly, it was one of the inspirations for this book. Was I started it when my daughter was 1 month old, and it was kind of a worst case scenario of a parent of going, where is my responsibility for how they turn out, and at what point does that responsibility end?
Thanks very much indeed, Noah. That was really interesting. And here's the thing, if you get the book from WHSmith, specifically in that store, there's loads of extra material in the back, including our question and answer session with the author. So he'll be talking more in the back of the book about some of the things he's been discussing there. There's lots of other stuff as well, how to download our podcasts, our app, all that kind of thing, but only if you get the book at WHSmith.